Hello to everyone. Thank you so much for your attention. As you know, I work, who listened to me not for the first time, I work for K-State now, the Department of Agricultural Economics, but originally I'm from Ukraine, and unfortunately, war brought me to America, searching for a shelter for my family, for my children. So, and first of all, today I have very excited news. If you didn't hear this yet, that President Biden just signed foreign aid bill. So I would like to express my appreciation to the President, American Congress, and Senate that positively voted for the aid for Ukraine, because this is really, really important for us and for the entire world, because Ukrainian people are fighting not only for their homeland, but also for the world democracy with aggressor, which is 300 times bigger than Ukraine. So thank you so much, America, for supporting Ukraine. Today, I'm going to cover the latest detail of current damages and losses in Ukrainian agriculture due to the war, provide updates regarding production and export of grain in Ukraine and Russia. And also, I would like to talk a little bit more today about place of Ukraine on soybean market, since this crop is getting more popular among Ukrainian farmers. We all know that Russian war brought to Ukraine a lot of death and damage to all sectors of economy, and agriculture is not an exception. Today, total documented damage in the agricultural sector amounts to $10.3 billion. The largest category in agricultural damages is destroyed or stolen agricultural machineries and equipment, which amounts to $5.8 billion, or 56.7% of total. About 181,000 units of agricultural machinery and equipment were partially or completely damaged due to the invasion. 11.3 million tons of storage facility are fully destroyed, and 3.3 million tons are partially damaged due to the invasion, resulting in total of $1.8 billion damage. At least 2.8 million tons of grain and 1.2 million tons of oilseed are considered damaged or stolen, which doesn't include harvested grain by Russia on occupied territories. Thousands of people were killed in Ukraine, but also many animals. In total, the war led to the loss of 238,000 heads of cattle, 544,000 heads of pig, 131,000 heads of sheep and goats, and almost 13 million heads of poultry. If we look at the distribution of damages, of course, those occupied areas and that are marked in red in the table, and liberated areas and areas that are closer to Russian border suffers the most, especially Kherson and Zaporizhia region after dam explosion. The damage done to agriculture of those two regions amounted to $5 billion. Those two regions were great producers of winter wheat, sunflowers, and vegetables. And the damage to Kakhovka Dam led to total damage of irrigation system. The damage done to Donetsk and Luhansk region is lower because they were more industrial region, and they were under war since 2014 and already been significantly damaged before 2022. Here is a latest interactive map of damages done to agriculture due to explosive objects that left on a Ukrainian field. So this map shows that, of course, a lot of damages and a lot of potentially contaminated areas are near borders and where active hostilities are. But in general, unfortunately, Ukraine, which has the most fertile soil in the world, currently is the most heavily mined country in the world. Mined area of Ukraine is approximately 26% of the total area of our country, which is equal to the area of Greece or 4 times of the size of Switzerland or half of Germany. The areas along the front line are heavily contaminated, and clearance efforts there will be complex, costly, and time-consuming, requiring application of the highest technical standards. Ukraine is doing a great job of demining liberated areas with international support. During 2023, Ukrainian sappers were able to survey a territory of 18,000 square kilometers. Currently, at least 12,000 square kilometers of potentially contaminated land require immediate technical survey, and another 9,000 square kilometers require immediate clearance of mines and explosive objects due to safety reason for population. More than 6 million people are at risk. Almost every month we read in the news that farmers are blown up by landmines in one place on another, trying to demine their farmland. And this is a really complicated process. And that is, first of all, because Ukraine doesn't have enough equipment for demining. As for now, Ukraine has only 30 heavy machines for demining and only 26 certified authorized operators and 3,000 sappers. So it will take decades with these possibilities that we have now to demine the territory. And this leads to larger and larger losses in agricultural sectors. According to estimates of the Kiev School of Economics, around 19% of agricultural land are potentially contaminated with explosives. And due to land contamination, farmers lose around $930 per hectare. And Ukraine is doing a pretty good job, as I mentioned, and in 2023, Ukrainian sappers examined 274,000 hectares of agricultural land, and 208,000 hectares were returned to cultivations, but it's still not enough to clean all the land and return quickly this land to agricultural production. So indirect losses, they are growing, and indirect losses amounted almost $70 billion. And as you can see, indirect losses opposite to direct damages, which are localized in the area affected by the ground battles, losses kind of distributed among all over Ukraine and among all relatively safe region. For example, Vinnytsia Oblast has the highest losses among relatively safe region, almost $5 billion, followed by Khmelnytsky region with losses of $4 billion due to loss of their high productivity potential. So total indirect losses in Ukrainian agricultural amounted $70 billion, namely foregone revenue due to lower production, reduced prices, and increased production costs. The most significant category of losses is caused by lower annual crop production, that is $34.3 billion, including 48.6 million tons reduction in grain production and 8.7 million tons reduction in sunflower production. The main reason is lower cultivating area due to loss of territories and lower yields due to war-induced changes in production technologies. The second largest category of losses results from a decrease in domestic prices, totaling $24.1 billion, or nearly 35% of all losses. export disruption due to the naval blockade imposed by Russia significantly complicated logistics for Ukrainian agricultural export, increasing logistic costs, at the same time reducing demand and prices for agricultural commodities in the domestic market. So despite the war, Ukrainian agriculture remains the most important branch that fills the budget of Ukraine, feeds Ukrainian and many other nations. Agricultural sector has always been the main driver of the Ukrainian economy, making up the largest share of Ukrainian GDP and export revenue. Since Russian invasion in 2014 and occupation of Ukrainian industrial region Donbass, the share of egg export in total export grown over 40%. Since the full-scale invasion in 2022, agricultural export decreased in monetary and volume sense. However, its share in total export increased to 53% in 2022 and 61% in 2023. Grain production and exports ensured this growth. In 2023, grain export amounted 23% of all agricultural export. That was the highest in the history of Ukraine. That is why keeping grain production and export moving is extremely important for Ukrainian economy recovery, but also for global food security. So what is the current stage of Ukrainian grain export? Since September, after opening a Ukrainian humanitarian corridor from Great Odessa ports, Ukrainian grain export significantly increased, almost reaching their pre-war capacity. And as for today, in April, we exported almost 4.9 million tons of grain, more than 2.8 million tons than in April 2023, due to high export of wheat and corn. However, totally in this marketing year, we're still behind compared to the previous marketing year. Although the volume of grain export increases, income, as you can see, received is mainly lower than in previous year due to lower prices on the global market. And also many farmers have losses for 2 years in a row and not able to increase their production. For 2 years of the war, Ukraine exported already over 125 million tons of agricultural commodities, including 52.6 million tons of corn, 31.5 million tons of wheat, and 11 million tons of sunflower oil. In February, Ukraine had the record wheat export, 2.5 million tons. In March, we had also pretty intensive export of sunflower oil and barley. Dotted lines in April shows export as for middle of April, and the solid line, that is what we have for today, as for today. So with these numbers, we believe that by the end of April, corn export will be around 3.5 million tons and wheat around 1.5 million tons. Of course, big challenge for Ukraine and the rest of the world in terms of ensuring food security is availability of an uninterrupted export logistics from Ukraine. Before the war, 90% of Ukrainian export was going through Black Sea port, and up to 98% of grain exports were going through Black Sea ports. But as you know, that was interrupted due to blockade. But from beginning of the August in 2022, due to UN grain initiative situation improved. However, we never reached our export capacity at that period of time. After that, as you remember, that Russia terminated this agreement, and later, since almost September, Ukrainian humanitarian corridors started to operate. And this actually gives us an opportunity to export much more. And now we just rely on our own side and our militaries. So, but despite all the situation, we continue to feed the world and trying to find all other best solutions how to export grain from Ukraine. And as you can see, other alternative roads like Danube River ports, railway and trucks increased during this period of time. However, now exports through the new river ports is decreasing because even domestic logistic of getting to the new river ports is more complicated and expensive, and logistic from the new river ports is also more expensive than from Black Sea ports. So that is why now we have less export from the new river ports. Another also a situation that we continue to have, that is blocked borders with Poland, and this limits our export by trucks, but also railway export also decreased. So there are some still complications, but we believe situation will improve. Actually, yesterday, European Commission approved the extension of the agreement on duty-free trade with Ukraine till June 2025, but we strengthened protective measures for European farmers, such as the possibility to limit the export of certain categories of Ukrainian agricultural products to the EU, namely poultry, eggs, sugar, oats, corn, and honey. So they said that if import of these products exceeds the average volume of imports registered in the second half of 2021, as well as throughout 22 and 23, the tariffs will be revised. In addition, European Commission undertakes the monitoring of grain import, in particular wheat, to be sure that this grain is not for export to European Union, but just for re-exports through European Union. So Ukraine continues working on developing alternative routes for grain exports through Europe. As many of you know, that size of railway tracks in post-Soviet countries and Europe are different, which may increase of this type of transshipment difficult. And to solve this problem, more and more popular is getting building so-called dry ports, mostly located on the borders, land borders with European neighboring countries. And usually those dry ports have both types of tracks, European and Ukrainian, and reloading stations and storage capacities. So lately, two new dry ports were opened, one in Dardanelli in Romania with simultaneous loading and unloading capacities of 500 tons per hour, and another in Zakarpattia region in Ukraine with a simultaneous loading and unloading capacity of 200 tons per hour. And I would like to mention that a very famous American philanthropist, Howard Buffett, invested into this project in addition to providing mechanized demining machines and other humanitarian aid for Ukraine. So, of course, America supports a lot Ukraine, and we really appreciate this. So, since Ukrainian export logistic is changing, consequently, geographical structure of grain export is also changing. If before the war, China, Egypt, and Indonesia were the main importers of Ukrainian grain, since the beginning of the war, they significantly decreased buying grain from Ukraine. Many other African countries were also not able to receive grain from Ukraine, which raised food insecurity issues. Instead, many European countries appeared on the list of top importers from Ukraine. As you know, traditionally, Europe was a competitor of grain on a grain market with Ukraine, but they opened their borders and they introduced free trade with Ukraine. And as you remember, Turkey, being a negotiator of grain deal, received priority and discount for grain purchase and almost tripled the import of grain from Ukraine. Unfortunately, European market became very fast, very quickly oversaturated with cheap Ukrainian grain, and 5 countries introduced a ban on egg export from Ukraine. And actually, only Spain currently having access to the ocean continue to increase purchasing grain from Ukraine. But it mainly goes for export, which makes additional pressure on the world prices and make it more expensive for buyers. Some countries return to Ukrainian market after opening humanitarian corridor. We can see again Indonesia and Pakistan. There is also South Korea appeared on the list of top grain importers from Ukraine. However, our current export is behind of our potential and needs. And there is no guarantee that tomorrow Russia will not make another missile attack to Ukrainian Black Sea ports infrastructure in Odessa. So there are a lot of discussion about grain export from Ukraine to Europe, and I will one more time emphasize that the majority of Ukrainian grain that come to Europe go for re-export, and European traders benefit from this due to price difference. Their importers lose because they have to buy more expensive grain that they would buy directly from Ukraine, but unfortunately, because of currently limited export capacity from Ukraine, they don't have much choices. We can see that main European trade partners are African and Asian, and their list have not changed significantly. This is the bottom of the slide. However, the amount of their grain purchase from Europe is growing, and for some countries like China is already exceeded and will exceed previous marketing year. For 8 months of 23-24 marketing year, Morocco already bought 91% of previous year grain purchase and 50% that they bought in 21-22. Nigeria bought already 72% of their purchase in 22-23 marketing year and 91% of their 21-22 marketing year purchase. We also can see now Indonesia, which was the main Ukrainian partner before the war. So this export includes all this re-export that you can see that in 2022-23, Ukraine sold to Europe over 22 million tons of grain. And now they have high ending stocks and try to resell it further. But also European processors benefit from Ukrainian grain as well. Millers, producers of vegetable oils and bioethanol, happy to buy cheaper and good quality grain from Ukraine and produce higher value added products for domestic usage, but also for further export. So as you noticed, in 2023-24, European Union imported actually more grain, not only from Ukraine compared to pre-war level, but also they're buying grain from Russia. And this is kind of double standard as to me. Prices. Unfortunately, Ukrainian grain is still remains the cheapest, but the gap between world prices and Ukrainian prices are narrowing. Since the middle of March, we observe growing tendency, mainly on all grain markets, not for American wheat and corn, but mainly prices are increasing, and American price was a little bit higher, so they're getting closer to world prices. Ukrainian wheat has been traded lately for $200 per ton, $20 less than American and French. Ukrainian feed wheat was traded for $183 billion per ton, $22 cheaper than Russian. Ukrainian corn had traded for $181 per ton, just $8 cheaper compared to American. On a barley market, there is a largest price gap in between Ukrainian and world grain. It was traded for $178 when Australian barley was 234. And there is a lot of talk about this in Ukraine, that we kind of losing barley production and barley market is dying. So that is probably what I have about export and situation with export. And if there is any questions, we can get questions.
Yeah, we'll interlude here a little bit for questions, and then we'll go into kind of the production situation looking for 2024. There's one question in terms of, you mentioned demining to be one of the obstacles in the sector domestically. Are there any other factors slowing down the production, funding to farmers, logistics, transportation, storage, processing? And so part of this may get on the next section, but I think maybe if you want to go ahead and answer this one.
So I would say all the above. So not only the mining slowing down the production, but also availability of inputs. And also, we will talk about this in the next part, that production in Ukraine is not profitable now, and farmers don't have enough assets to buy inputs. And some farmers are just cutting their production. So that's also a big issue with. But we will talk about this. And of course, storage facilities. Now it's getting better because we got a lot of plastic bags. We started to build new storage facilities, especially more close to ports and western borders. So we try to solve this problem. And also production level is lower, so it's not so big issue for now. Compared to demining or availability of inputs like fertilizers and seeds, etc.
Another question in terms of what's your take on China canceling corn shipments from Ukraine lately? In terms of, do you have thoughts on that, or any idea what's happening there?
It's hard to predict, right, the behavior of China, but knowing that they're getting closer with Russia in many aspects, not actually in corn export, because Russia is not so big exporter of corn. They mainly what they produce, they consume domestically. But I think that is more political game. But also China started to buy more corn from Brazil. So and opposite, Russia has much more connections now with Brazil and Mexico, selling grain there. So I think that there are some political aspects involved.
Any last question, or we'll move on to what the 2024 outlook looks for Ukraine very early in the season.
Okay. So, grain and oilseeds production. That is kind of our harvest in 2023-24 marketing year. Totally, we harvested 58.5 million tons of main grain crops. And due to liberation of some territories, we were able to harvest even more than expected of wheat, barley, and peas. However, more than 7% of corn crops, or around 300,000 hectares, were not harvested. So the final result for corn is 29.3 million tons. For the majority of crops in 2023, yields were better, not only compared to 2022, but also to 2021. In particular, wheat yields per hectare increased for 18%. This is just to our rich soil, favorable weather conditions, and usage of some good seeds, some good quality seeds from donors that farmers received under the USAID and other programs. But for the next year, we do not expect such good results. We expect reduction in yields and harvest due to lower application of fertilizers and plant protection products, unless, I don't know, miracle happens. Spring campaign started, but many crops, it is just at the beginning of sowing. So it is hard to make final estimates, but we expect to plant 2.6 million hectares of grain crops, which 26% less than in pre-war level, and 7 million hectares of oil crops, which is going to be 500,000 hectares more than in 2021. This switch is related to the problems with corn harvesting and smaller losses from production of oil crops compared to grain crops. Totally, we expect to plant spring crops 2% more than in previous season, but it is still 16% less than in 2021. I highlighted soybean for a reason. As you can see, last year its crops increased for over 500,000 hectares, and this year we expect a further increase, totally for 55% compared to pre-war level. As for now, we plan to sow around 2 million hectares of soybean, but I also heard some estimates up to 2.2 million hectares. So soybeans are getting more and more popular crops and more important, and we will talk about this later. The outlook of Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine for 2024 is around 74 million tons, including 52.4 million tons of grain and legumes and 21.7 million tons of oil seeds. There is more significant decrease in grain production rather than in oilseeds production due to crop replacement. Next season, we expect to harvest 26.7 million tons of corn, 2.6 ton less than in 2023. The estimates for wheat is 19.2 million tons, 3 million tons less than in 2023, and 4.9 million tons of barley, which 1 million tons less than in 2023. But for oil crops, forecast is more optimistic. We harvested 4.8 million tons of soybean, and we expect in 24 5.2 million tons, or maybe even more, depending on final sowing area. We also expect increase in rapeseed and sunflower production. Decrease in grain production will consequently lead to decrease in grain export. We expect to finish 23-24 marketing year with total 53.2 million tons of crop export, including 45 million tons of grain and 8 million tons of oil seeds. But the next 24-25 marketing year expectations are very pessimistic. 43.7 million tons, totally including 34 million tons of grain. This season we expect to finish with 26 million tons of corn and 16 million tons of wheat and 2.5 million tons of barley. USDA forecast lower for corn, but they increased this month their forecast for wheat for 1.5 million tons. And I really agree with this, since we already exported so far over 15 million tons of wheat, and we still have pretty good size of stocks. Regarding the export of oil crops, soybean export will increase, but we expect further decrease in sunflower seeds export related to both harvest decrease and processing increase due to more stable sunflower oil export logistics. Here is the latest balance of grain supply and demand in Ukraine with estimates for this and next season. We expect that our ending stocks for this and next marketing year will be relatively stable, around 4 million tons, which is pretty close to our normal stocks before the war. Our production and export are getting lower and lower, but also there is a decrease in domestic consumption, both for food and fodder. There are several reasons for this. Since the beginning of the war, over 10 million Ukrainians left Ukraine. Some of them returned, but there are still around 6.5 million Ukrainians abroad as refugees. Another reason that another reason that we have still a lot of livestock that was gone, and to renew in short term livestock, that is very complicated. Actually, also in terms of consumption, the latest report I read that in March 2024, 23.2% of Ukrainians stated that they have to save on food. And this is also increasing food insecurity in Ukraine in particular, even we are self-sufficient in production, but affordability is also the issue. So now let's take a look on average profitability of agricultural production during the war. For 2 years in a row, as I mentioned, Ukrainian farmers are losing from crop production. The highest losses were from barley and corn production, and it is true for next season. That is why many farmers are switching from oil crops, especially from corn to oil crops, especially to soybean, which provides profit of provided profit of $69 per ton in 23, and we expect $76 profit per ton in 2024. Although soybean area under soybean is rising, is still not so large compared to wheat, corn, or sunflower, so not many farmers can really benefit from it. And not all farmers are ready to switch due to shortage of seeds, some specific agronomic knowledge and equipment they would need. Another reason is that soybeans, like corn, need to be dried for storing, and having destroyed electricity infrastructure, sometimes switching does not make sense. So we expect that 24-25 marketing year, all oil crops will be profitable, but it is significantly less than before the war. Trying to reduce the cost of crop production, Ukrainian farmers are reducing application of fertilizers. Not only export logistics for grain was interrupted since the beginning of the war, but import logistics for inputs as well. Fertilizers prices spiked in 2022 following Russian invasion, especially for potassium chloride, when Russia and Belarus are top exporters. The most used fertilizers both in the world and in Ukraine are the nitrogen group, the main raw material for the production of which is natural gas. And this making Russia one of the largest exporter of fertilizer and raw material for its production. Thanks to gas sanctions, it was possible to reduce world prices for fertilizers. And in 2023, the situation for most agricultural inputs has stabilized and prices have declined. Yet they did not reach the pre-war level, but already farmers stated that they are going to increase application of fertilizers for 15 to 20%. A ratio of how much agricultural products need to be sold in order to buy 1 ton of fertilizer is getting much better now compared to 2022 year, but there is no significant difference with 2023. Currently, farmers need to sell 3,760,000 tons of corn. 3.76 tons of corn to buy 1 ton of urea. Last season, the same amount of fertilizers was worth 3.57 tons of corn. Regarding ammonium nitrate or complex fertilizers, the trend is more positive. In this season, farmers need to spend a smaller amount of grain on the purchase of this fertilizer. In March, the ratio for wheat needed to be sold for 1 ton of ammonium nitrate was 2.64 compared to 3.6 a year ago. But even with lowering this ratio, many farmers will still not be able to afford enough fertilizer for this season. Unfortunately, there is no official statistics regarding provision of farmers with fertilizers. According to different experts and surveys, it varies from 65 to 85% depending from the region. There is also expectation that, as I mentioned, that fertilizer application will increase, but it's still going to be up to 40% less from the norms. However, I have official statistic regarding provision of farmers with plant protection products, and as you can see, it's a current average rate 83.4%, including herbicides 85%. But this rate is different from region to region, and actually Odessa, as you can see, is fully provided with plant protection products, and that is due to proximity to the ports, and also we can see Dnipro region. The lowest rate is in the Donetsk region. We're talking here about those territories that are under Ukrainian control. It is really surprisingly that there is very low level of provision with plant protection products in Lviv region, which I assume related to blockade of a Polish border by Polish farmers, because they block not only the exit of Ukrainian trucks with grain, but also trucks entrance to Ukraine. Let's compare profitability of corn and soybeans. Reducing rate of fertilizer and plant protection products application, and with their relative price decrease, farmer will be able to reduce production cost to average $824 per hectare. Selling is directly to elevators or exporting through Odessa port, they will have lost amounted $29 per ton because prices for corn decline. But if we add logistic cost to get grain to Romania or Poland, losses can double. So there is no economic sense to export corn through other ports out of Ukraine, but we still do because we don't have much choices. With soybean, situation is different. Seeds are cheaper and less fertilizers are needed. This significantly lowers the cost of production compared to corn. The forecast is $645 per hectare, but price for soybean is twice higher than for corn. This gives Ukrainian farmers opportunity to receive $76 profit per ton domestically and $85 per ton selling to the traders in Odessa ports for export. And even exporting through Romania and Poland, they will still have some profit. So that is why I wanted to tell you a little bit more about role of Ukraine on soybean market. Ukraine is sixth on the world soybean market with over 3 million tons export per year, and it is growing. Our share is 1.8% of total world export. Of course, it is hard to compete with Brazil and the US, but our main target market is actually Europe. On soybean oil market, Ukraine is seventh. We export around 300,000 tons per year, making 2.6% share of the world export. And I don't have here, but on the soybean meal market, we are 11th. This market in a year, we will export around 700,000 tons, and this is 1% of the world market. Due to a relatively lower production cost and higher profitability, soybeans are getting more and more popular among Ukrainian farmers. And over the last 2 decades, Ukrainian soybean harvest increased for 8 times, both due to larger planting areas, and which increased for over 4 times since 2005, and 1.2 million tons higher yields per hectare that we had last year compared to 2005. So as a result, our harvest reached such high level, almost we are close to 5 million tons, and next year we expect to harvest at least 5.2 or even 6 million tons if weather will be good and we would plant more soybeans. Another reason for increasing soybean crops is domestic availability of processing plants and growing demand domestically and abroad for soybean oil and meal. With interrupted export logistic in 22-23 marketing year, 400,000 more soybeans were processed in Ukraine as for domestic consumption and as for export. So far, we already processed 1.1 million tons of soybean, and we probably can double it till the end of summer. Due to increased production, Ukraine more than doubled its soybean export from 22-23 marketing year. In 23-24 marketing year, we already have pretty intensive export, and after new harvest, we reached a record monthly export in November, amounted 513,000 tons a month. So far, we exported 2.4 million tons and expect to reach at least last year level. Before the war, our main target markets for soybean export were Turkey and European countries. In 22-23, Turkey became a leader, buying more grain and oil seeds from Ukraine under United Nations grain deal. Turkey almost doubled their purchase of soybeans from Ukraine. Also, Romania, Italy, and Egypt significantly increased their import of soybeans from Ukraine. But currently, Egypt is the leader, and for 7 months of this marketing year, they already bought 300,000 tons more soybeans than in entire 22-23 marketing year. On soybean oil and meal markets, Poland is traditional leader, buying over 200,000 tons per year of each commodity. Actually, here is our geography is more diverse compared to soybean seeds market. In addition to European countries, we can see Asian, Middle East, and African countries. Before the war, we also had significant export of soybeans and soybean meal to Belarus, but for obvious reason, not anymore. So if Ukraine will continue to increase production and export of soybeans and byproducts, we will be more competitive, and our position on the world market will become stronger. But as for me, it is much better for Ukraine to increase processing of soybean domestically and sell higher value-added products. So I would stop here for a minute, and if we have questions regarding production and forecast of production and export in Ukraine, I'm happy to respond.
Questions on Ukrainian production looking at 2024? Maybe just to reiterate, the biggest reason for movement to soybeans, would that be the less input cost or just the output price dynamics in Ukraine compared to corn or wheat?
It's actually both. Of course, the main part of this that is cheaper inputs, cheaper seeds, and lower rate of needed fertilizers. But also price is more attractive for soybeans. So as for now, all oil crops, and because we have domestically processing plants for soybeans and sunflower, so it's more attractive with interrupted export logistic to sell it domestically. But here we face another problem. We need to be sure that we would have enough power, electricity, right, and those to operate, and also that those factors will stay, they would not be damaged. So that is another issue. But as for now, that is a tendency that we have.
And because a lot of the soybeans are going to Europe, those would likely be exported via rail or truck compared to sea?
We actually export this also via seaports and the new river ports, but of course here railway export would prevail, and for some countries, right? But we also export a lot of oil. If we are talking not about soybean oil, but sunflower oil, we also export a lot of oil to India, and that of course goes via ports.
And then Dan has a question here. Are the increased in soybean and other oil seeds, are they taking wheat acres or just mostly corn acres?
Mostly corn acres, because we expect, if you would return to previous slide, we actually expect that next year many farmers will have maybe a little bit profit with wheat production, or at least zero, so that it's gonna be better. So many farmers are still willing to produce more wheat, and as I mentioned, not many farmers know how to grow soybean, and some afraid, and some always had wheat, and they continue to do so.
Another question from Pierre: are the exports of soy to Poland and Hungary unopposed? Do these countries have insufficient production to meet their domestic needs? And so,
right, they don't have enough production of oil crops in their countries, so they usually buy this from Ukraine. So actually, almost half of their vegetable oil import comes from Ukraine, and that was traditionally.
any other questions?
Okay, then
we'll let Antonina finish up with what's going on in Russia.
Okay, now a few words about Russian grain production and export. 2023 was not so successful than 2022 for Russia, and this is understandable. In 2022, all harvested grain in Ukraine on Ukrainian occupied territories and also stolen Ukrainian grain from elevators was added to the sum, and they reported over 157 million tons of grain and legumes harvested, including almost 106 million tons of wheat. In 2023, this sum is lower. It's around 145 million tons, and already this lower compared to previous year because it was nothing to steal, of course, but they still harvest crops from Ukrainian occupied territories, and that is why this indicator is still much higher compared to the average level pre-war the war. At the same time, Russia was not able to harvest over 1 million hectares of grain and 1 million hectares on sunflower seeds. And I don't know for which reason. Is it occupied areas that were not harvested, or their areas due to whether some circumstances or whatever. This year, Russian State Statistics Service reported 92.8 million tons of wheat being harvested. But for next year, the forecast is more pessimistic. So Russian ministry announced that they are gonna harvest next year 132.8 million tons of grain, totally including 90.4 million tons of wheat. Russian foreign trade with grain remained pretty stable, and they increasing their forecast for this marketing year from 66.7 million tons up to 70 million tons. Around 80% of Russian export is wheat. So far, they exported almost 41 million tons of wheat and 54 million tons of grain totally. In March, they reported a record export of 6.5 million tons. I have no proofs for this, therefore I doubt this, but who knows. Ending stocks totally and for wheat are still in general higher compared to the pre-war level, but very much equal to previous year. Wheat ending stocks in April 24 are very close to wheat stocks in January 2022, before the beginning of the war. But with such intensive export, Russia believes that by the end of the year, wheat ending stocks will around 5 million tons. Geography of main crop that Russia exports, wheat, have changed. Turkey and Egypt are traditional buyer from Russia, but there are also new importers like Algeria, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and they have pretty intensive import from Russia lately, and they increase their import from Russia. For 6 months of this marketing year, they bought almost the same amount that they bought in previous year, and by the end of the year it can be higher. Since the beginning of the war, Russia started to sell wheat to Mexico and Brazil, as already mentioned, and they actually continue, as you can see, to increase, and this is only for 6 months, so I believe by the end of the year that's gonna be much higher. So share of Russia on wheat market grows, and this year Russia has almost a quarter of wheat market, and this what we probably need to worry a little bit globally, because world is getting more and more dependent from supply of main grain crop from Russia, which is not really a reliable partner. But as you can see, they dominate, and it is questionable if they would export 52.5 million tons, according to latest estimates, or it can be up to 55 million tons, as was announced lately by Ministry of Agriculture in Russia. So this is the situation what we have on a Russian grape market, and that is it what I wanted to present today. If there are any other questions, I'm gonna answer. Okay, the question was about that in Russian acreage. Let me return to this table. Oops.
Yes, yeah, that one right there.
Yeah, that in Russian acreage, that appeared additional 2.4 million hectares of additional farmland.
Yeah, I was comparing that 45.42 to 47, and in just looking at the map, that almost seems proportionally small in terms of the amount of land as a proportion of the cropland in Ukraine that was taken. So I was wondering.
Right. So that was not the whole land that they reported, and they actually they say that they do not include officially new regions into statistics, but Crimea is included officially already, and they also report about Donetsk. So that could be that part. So, but even they didn't add it. The area, the acreage, they added the harvest.